pretty hot topic.
Hmm.
The money side, the actual experience for rideshare drivers, specifically Lyft drivers here.
Yeah, and our job really is to pull out what matters from there.
Exactly. Cut through the noise. What are the key facts, the surprising numbers, give you a clear picture beyond just the headlines.
Because there's often a gap, isn't there? Lyft talks about drivers getting, what is it, 70% or more after external
Right.
fees?
Sounds good on the surface.
But the independent studies, the driver accounts in these sources, they often paint a, let's say, more challenging picture of actual take-home pay.
Okay, let's unpack that 70% thing because it sounds simple.
Okay.
But what's the real number after a driver pays for, well, everything? Fuel, maintenance, all that stuff.
Well, that's the crux of it, isn't it? Understanding what isn't included in those external fees Lyft mentions. Those are more like, say, taxes or the insurance Lyft provides during the ride itself. But the sources really highlight the massive costs drivers carry themselves.
Costs like gas, obviously. Keeping the car running. Extra insurance for when they're not on a trip.
Exactly. And the big one, depreciation. Driving all those miles really tanks a car's value fast.
Right.
And the studies you sent, they show this pretty starkly. There was an older MIT study, maybe 2018. It found median pre-tax profit, which is $3.37 an hour after costs.
$3.37. Wow.
Yeah, and it suggested like 30% were actually losing money. Now, things have changed, rates fluctuate, but even more recent data, like a UC Berkeley study in California.
What did that find?
Median net hourly wage around $7.12. That's before tips or taxes, mind you.
Still quite low.
And even looking at Lyft's own figures from late 2023, they reported a median net of $23.46 per engaged hour.
Okay, engaged hour. That's key, right? Only when a passenger is in the car.
Precisely. Not all the waiting time, the driving to a pickup. And even that $23.46, once you factor in all the driver's costs and all their time online, many sources argue it still leaves drivers below minimum wage equivalents.
And then there's this whole other layer in the sources. The algorithms. The AI managing things behind the scenes.
Oh, yeah, that's fascinating. And a bit controversial. The platforms use these complex systems for everything, offering incentives, maybe even, managing ride offers in ways drivers don't fully see.
Like those shadowed offers drivers talk about. Rides appearing and disappearing.
Exactly, or bonuses that seem to expire just as they get close. It raises that big question from the sources. If they're independent contractors, why is the platform managing their work so well directly?
Right.
And their FTC even stepped in, didn't they? Fined Lyft $2.1 million for deceptive earnings claims between 2021 and 2022.
Deceptive how?
Things like using top earners' figures in ads or including tips and advertise rates without making it super clear.
So, okay, you've got these big operating costs, questions around algorithms affecting pay, and net earnings that often seem pretty low. It's a tough situation, it seems.
It really seems to be. Some sources estimate driver operating costs are maybe $0.33 per mile.
Okay.
Compare that to, say, the IRS standard mileage deduction around 70 cents a mile recently. That's meant to cover everything. The gap between base pay structures and real costs can be huge.
But looking through these later sources, it feels like there's pushback happening. Legal challenges, new regulations.
Absolutely. This is where things are shifting. We're seeing major challenges to that classic independent contractor model. Look at
You
Massachusetts.
did settlement.
Yeah, $175 million with Uber and Lyft. But critically, it includes mandated minimum pay, $33.48 per engaged hour, plus benefits paid sick leave, health stipend contributions.
$33.48 an hour, engagement. That changes the game, potentially.
It's a significant shift. And it's not just Massachusetts. Minnesota passed a state law. Specific rates. $1.28 per mile, $0.31 per minute. Minimum $5 per ride.
And cities too, right? Seattle, New York.
Yep, they've got their own minimum pay standards already in place.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Pulling everything together from this deep dive into your sources, what's the main takeaway here?
Well, I think it reveals this landscape where Lyft drivers and likely other gig drivers too face pretty serious financial pressures. It seems rooted in a business model that shifts major costs onto the worker, and then you add that layer of opaque algorithmic control. The result, reported income often struggles to meet traditional minimum wage standards after you account for everything.
But as you said, the sources also clearly show this growing wave of legal and regulatory action, that huge Massachusetts settlement, the Minnesota law setting specific rates, even the FTC, fine.
Definitely. And these actions, often pushed by driver advocacy and the kind of analysis found in your sources, are starting to reshape things. They're really testing the boundaries of that independent contractor label.
Right, and leading to new minimum standards that actually try to account for the real time and the real cost of doing the work. Okay, so here's a final thought for you, the listener, to chew on based on all this. If laws and court decisions are increasingly setting minimum pay, forcing coverage for expenses, mandating benefits, does that traditional independent contractor model, at least how these platforms have used it, really have a sustainable future? Something to think about.